slip inside the eye. Imagine there's no heaven. Slip inside the eye.
Hi, and welcome to a very different type of video here on the Vaughn George channel. For those of you who have been following me from the beginning, love you loads. And to those of you who've just clicked upon this video, this channel focuses primarily on piano and keyboards and synthesizers and, any instrument that is keyboard related. But for today's video, I wanted to throw my net a little bit wider just to talk about Oasis 25. Now, I can hear some of my regular subscribers going, Vaughn, what the hell? Oasis is nothing to do with the genre of your channel. True. But I am going to, moving forward, do a little bit of a special on 90s music. Remember, the 90s was more my decade. I speak a lot about 80s music because of synthesizers and their origins, but the 90s was really my decade, and that is why I want to do quite a few 90s specials coming up. And regardless of that, whether you're an Oasis fan or not, Oasis were titans. They were legends. And I know it's a very emotionally charged subject for some people. Oasis is like Marmite. You either love it or hate it. Oasis is really a polarizing band and a polarizing subject. So whether you like them or loathe them, what you cannot deny is that Oasis is very, very important in pop culture and especially British music history. Like it or loathe it, that's the truth. And that is exactly the reason why I figured we cannot ignore this. This is going to dominate music headlines for many weeks, months to come. It's too big not to address in a video. So full disclosure, with that comes the admission that I am not an Oasis fan. I'm not an expert on it. I always like to talk about subjects that I'm a little bit more au fait with, but for all the reasons I mentioned previously, we do need to talk about this. Now, before we go any further, we asked Duran Duran's Nick Rhodes to give his 2 cents worth of input on this subject. I might have first learned about Oasis in, I believe, the mid-90s. It is, of course, not my cup of tea. It does lack finesse and sophistication. As much as I hate to admit it, there are, however, some similarities between Duran Duran and Oasis, as hard as that is for me to say. Of course, the visual aesthetic and the sound, the sonic complexity of Duran Duran cannot be replicated by anyone. I am the controller and I ensure that this is indeed the case. But the similarities between Duran Duran and Oasis, I guess, are down to Simon's dad dancing, kind of similar to the dad dancing in Oasis. I forget the lead singer's name. It may, however, be a very different style of dad dancing. It is, nevertheless, still dad dancing. Thank you very much. And that, of course, not Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran. Let's look at Oasis, some of the origins that I've researched. The Gallagher brothers both originated from the Longside area of Manchester. Noel was born on May the 29th, 1967, making him 57 years old at the time of the recording of this video. Younger brother Liam was born on the 21st of September, 1972, making him 51 years old at the time of the recording of this video. They were born to Irish Catholic parents Peggy and Thomas Gallagher. Growing up was not easy, and they had a very, very hard upbringing. Liam referred to Noel as the quote-unquote weirdo in the family. Noel was apparently a dreamer, a loner, and somewhat reclusive. I personally feel that Noel was probably a somewhat deeply reflective, sensitive soul, and the abusive environment which he grew up in did not help much. It's very evident to see that their childhood was very hard and, quite frankly, a very unhappy one. Noel and Liam also had an elder brother named Paul. After Liam was born in 1972, the family moved on to Ashby Avenue and then Carnwell Drive in Manchester suburb Burnage. As Paul was the oldest of the three brothers, he had the privilege of having his own bedroom. This meant that younger siblings, Noel and Liam, had to share a bedroom. Can you imagine that? Now, growing up, the boys were subject to regular beatings from their father, Thomas, who was an alcoholic. Noel has gone on to say that his father had, quote-unquote, beat the talent into him. Noel said that he has never discussed or acknowledged the abuse with a mental health doctor regarding his traumatic childhood. To make things even worse, Noel and his brother Paul both struggled with stammering, which was not helped by their father's abuse. Fortunately, their speech problems were resolved with weekly sessions and 4 years of speech therapy. In 1976, the relationship between the mother Peggy and the father Thomas had reached breaking point. Peggy acquired legal separation from Thomas, taking the three boys with her as she continued to raise them as a single mother. As teenagers, the Gallagher boys were known troublemakers, often getting into trouble with the police. Noel was expelled from school at age 15 for allegedly throwing a flower bomb at a teacher. Noel has apparently said that he never actually did it, he was merely in the classroom. Noel received 6 months of probation at the age of just 14 for robbing a corner shop. The brothers maintained limited contact with their father Thomas as they took on jobs in construction. The relationship between Father Thomas and the Gallagher sons, to put it mildly, was not good. So as I said, I did not know much about the background of the band besides the obvious stuff that we read in tabloids and stuff, and sort of delving into it, and of course I've only just scratched the surface, it was quite revealing, and a lot of their behavior kind of made sense to me. Not that we can excuse bad behavior, but just the way they grew up. We are products of our environment and the way we grow up, nature versus nurture. And a lot of the way they grew up made sense to the way they acted. It's a story of rags to riches. Now, if you've lived in Britain, you will understand it's a very class-conscious society. It masquerades as politically correct, but there's this undercurrent of classism there, which I won't go into. And Oasis were the sort of true British story. You know, there's this thing in the UK about what they call the working class, and I never understood that term because it's really sort of like, you're working class, and it's like, really? I mean, the Queen used to work, so couldn't she be considered working class? But anyway, the Brits love the underdog, and Oasis were underdogs. The classic rags to riches story. It is this kind of story which is revered by the working class man. The Brits love to see people that come from nothing and rise to the top and become like, Liam Gallagher, that's me Liam Gallagher voice, mate. And which is typical to British culture is the tabloids are brutal. And just once they've built you up, then they want to tear you apart. And that's pretty much what's happened here. And of course, the Gallagher brothers have done themselves no favors, really. Badass! A very big part of the Oasis brand, I think, is the attitude and the dad dancing, the hands behind the back, singing. He had a very iconic way of standing and singing into the microphone. I have to just say that whether you like Oasis or not, once again, I'm not a fan, but I do respect them, and I liked some of the songs. What you have to admit, whether you're a fan or not, is love them or loathe them, they are classic rock and roll in their attitude and everything. And I love the way they took some of that 60s vibe. They clearly were influenced by, John Lennon, the Beatles, and they unashamedly pushed that into the 90s. They pushed that into the 90s and essentially opened the floodgates for hundreds and hundreds of knockoff wannabe bands. I remember speaking to a friend of mine who worked in the music industry in the early 2000s, and he worked in A&R. He went on to say that every single demo CD that came across the A&R desks in the sort of early to mid 2000s, he said they either sounded like Radiohead or Oasis. So Oasis, whether you like them or not, were incredibly influential. The whole badass thing did become very, very overwhelming and a bit stale after a while. And I just hated the whole sort of like, I'm a tough guy thing. Now I have to just segue into, I grew up in South Africa in a small mining town. Now, I don't want to sound like a tough guy because I do not profess to be a tough guy. But what I can tell you is I met some genuinely tough guys back in those days. I can promise you I met some real badasses. So when I see them giving it all this and, on that little, and I'm just thinking, look, man, just fuck off. Just get back onto the stage, sing your songs, and don't be so much of a dick. It is understandable because in rock and roll and show business, we don't want our rock stars to be doormats or too humble. Although I can say a lot of my heroes that I've met have been quite humble people, but that's a different story altogether. But we do want our rock stars to kind of be larger than life. We don't want them to be too goody-goody and squeaky clean. But then again, we also want a little bit of humility. It's a very, very difficult line to tread. But Oasis were unashamedly on the very far side of the extremity. Noel, however, was far more cerebral. I think we all know him as the sensible one. And it's understandable if you've got a brother like Liam, how nervous you would be thinking he's your front man and stuff. And now there are some people who say ridiculous things like Liam can't sing. And to them, I say, oh, come on. I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here and say Liam Gallagher to me is arguably one of the last great rock stars. And I'm not a fan, but I'm giving credit where it's due. I saw some behind the scenes footage where they were making some of the iconic records. And I remember the producer or one of the engineers talking about how Noel would, sing the song and Liam would just go in and like knock it out in one or two takes. He was really, really talented. But whether you disagree or agree with that or not, their success speaks volumes. So Liam was incredibly hard work and the brothers did fall out a lot. And that brings me nicely onto the rivalry. They fell out a lot. They broke up. And it's well known that Noel and Liam apparently hate each other. Now, I want to challenge that idea. I don't think, and this is just a gut feeling, I don't think they hate each other. I mean, they're brothers, for God's sakes. Now, the rivalry thing was a thing. I understand that. Liam was off his face a lot of the time. It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I can't help thinking that this whole rivalry thing was jumped on by the media, but it also became part of the sort of PR and the marketing machine. The fallout and the discordance between the two brothers. That certainly was a thing. I sometimes think that the media and the whole Oasis marketing machine, I think that was like a thing to kind of create buzz and publicity. And we all know there's no such thing as bad publicity anymore. Now, I'm not excusing their misbehavior and everything like that, and Liam being a dick a lot of the time, but they did grow up in very difficult circumstances and a very rough, very, very rough background. Now, you may argue and say, there are people who grew up worse and have turned out to be decent people. And coming back to what I said earlier, regardless of what they went through and everything, all their misfortune and everything in life brought them to the point where they became a British supergroup and possibly one of the very last supergroups. And this brings me straight on to Oasis 25. Wherever you go, Oasis 25 is kicking off. It's great for selling newspapers. It's great for advertisers. It's great for everyone because it's this whole big fiasco. It's the biggest kind of media fiasco in the UK. It is, however, not that good, or maybe it is, for the fans, because the ticket prices are a huge, contentious issue. So they've announced their 2025 tour, and some of the haters are saying, oh, it's because they need money. And anyway, the opinions are just wide and varied. Now let's look at some of the shows which they will be performing at. There's Cardiff Principal Stadium, and that's on July the 4th. There's Cardiff Principality Stadium on July the 5th, and wow, that's a day after the 4th. I always get a bit nervous when bands of this age kind of like do 2 shows in a row like this. I hope they keep it together. Then there's Manchester Heaton Park. Oh, that'll be a big one. July the 11th, followed by Manchester Heaton Park again on July the 12th. Manchester Heaton Park again on the 16th of July. Manchester Heaton Park again on the 19th of July. Manchester Heaton Park again on the 20th of July. London Wembley Stadium on the 25th of July. London Wembley Stadium, 26th of July. London Wembley Stadium, 30th of July. London Wembley Stadium, 3rd of August. Edinburgh Murrayfield, 8th of August. Edinburgh Murrayfield, 9th of August. Edinburgh Murrayfield, 12th of August. Dublin Cork, 16th of August. And Dublin Cork, 17th of August. Now, these are huge shows, absolutely huge shows. And there has been a lot of bitching and moaning and ranting and upset online about the prices of the tickets, which is something I should address in a separate video. Now, I do understand the ethical argument from fans as to, you know, we've supported you all our lives. Do we need to pay £400 for a ticket? There is also the other side, which is, okay, free market, supply and demand. If someone is prepared to pay £400 for it and you don't want to, that's none of your business. I get both sides of the argument. I just personally wouldn't pay it.
Meme overload.
And with all the upset and pandemonium online came some really, really good memes, and I'm going to look at some of them now. I don't know that one. Here, let me play Wonderwall again. And this is quite funny because there was a time whenever you went out to a bar or a club where there was like an acoustic artist or some guy on a guitar, or even some homeless guy on the street playing a guitar, they would always sing Wonderwall. And Oasis's music is really good to play if you're learning to play guitar. I certainly learned some of their songs when I was learning guitar because they're quite simple to learn. Now, simple does not mean bad, but they are simple and effective. I love this one. That, of course, the Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, and there are all kinds of jokes as to, you know, it'll probably be cancelled after the first show. I do hope that Liam has grown up. You know, when you're in your 20s and you've got that, yeah, it's whatever. But I think when you get to the point when you're in your 50s, it's like, okay, mate, maybe it's time to grow up. We don't want you to be too goody-goody, but, you know, just don't be too much of a dick. This was my favorite. Now, I assume this, judging by the styles, this looks like it came out in the 80s before Oasis. So we could argue that they own the trademark as opposed to the UK Oasis. But I have to give full credit to these mullets here. I mean, just look at the mullet on the left, and full respect. Oasis. Is it Oasis? This one really.
Is it my imagination?
I love this 90s Britpop brother. Includes wig, anorak, four GCSEs, mate. 4 GCSEs, mate. Sunglasses and a roll. Oh, it cracked me up. Now, some of them are really nasty, like this one. £900 to watch a crackhead bang a tambourine on stage while singing out of key. Nah, I'll give it a miss. That's harsh. Oasis under fire for being a working class band and charging €400 a ticket. This one really made me laugh. Woman left furious after purchasing £700 Oasis pre-sales online, only to be sent a bottle of Oasis by Royal Mail delivery the following day. Susan, 32, from Exeter, says, I never even drank Oasis in my life. It's full of sugar. The ticket prices, quite frankly, are
Taking the piss.
Ticket prices, however, have been a huge subject. Now, it's not always the band that is to blame. I think there's a lot of opportunists in this industry. You know, people buying the tickets and then selling them for ridiculous prices afterwards. A subject for another video, which we'll go into in a lot of detail. And finally,
Do we care?
Do we care? Personally, I don't. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm just not an Oasis fan. However, I'm happy about this. It is good to see this happening. It's good for the fans. It's causing a lot of rift. But I mean, let's face it. These are first world problems. You know, in the bigger scheme of things, this is not really a big deal. But just to summarize my position on Oasis, as I said, I'm not a fan, but I did like quite a few of their songs. Now, some casual Oasis fans did go on to say that the first two albums were brilliant and everything after that was just a repeat of the first two. I'm not too sure about that. I'm not too familiar with most of their songs, but I do know the hits. And as I say, I've learned to play quite a lot of their songs on guitar when I was learning to play guitar because I'm a keyboardist and a pianist. And despite the simplicity of the songs, they are very, very well put together. We cannot knock the fact that the songs are brilliant. And they, as a rock band, like them or loathe them, are brilliant. They are the part. They look the part. The success speaks volumes, whether you or I like it or not. And now, my friend, it is up to you. I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Please leave your comments below and let me know, what do you think of this? Are you an Oasis fan? Are you not? Are you going to the show? What do you think of the prices? Do you have a great meme you want to share with us? Anything you want to add to this conversation, let me know. If this is the first time you've stumbled across this channel and you've made it this far, I want to congratulate you for your persistence, and I hope I have earned your subscription. And please hit the like button because it does help me a lot. That's it from me. Lots of love. I'll see you on the next video. Adios.